Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about the idea that doing a very high protein diet plus training fasted is a great way to get body recomposition. And this is something I have found extremely useful in my later years. And of course, I used a lot of intermittent fasting during my early weight loss when I lost over 100 pounds before. So let me give a little bit of backstory there. I was extremely obese when I was young, 19 or 20 or so, over 300 pounds, eventually got down to 170, and then got seriously into lifting and rebuilt from there. In my very early 30s, I'm now 48, I got really sick. My Meniere's disease got really bad. It went bilateral. I became completely disabled. Really couldn't do a lot without getting nauseated, vomiting. So I pretty much was stuck in bed. I stayed in bed, got extremely depressed, had severe debilitating depression on top of all of that. And I gained a lot of weight, had to get back up, eventually finally pulled myself up out of bed. Learned to walk again, lost 100 pounds, and it kind of went on this journey that you guys see here. Like my original 2012 channel on the tubes was documenting some of that, right? It was documenting a lot of that. And so in doing so, again, I used a lot of fasting. I used different approaches, lower carb, lower fat. The thing that I always found worked well for me, though, was at least when I wanted to lose fat, was always some type of fasting with really high proteins. Now, I'm not saying that fasting is magical. I think it's largely appetite control, but the more I've researched this stuff, the more I've come to realize, especially when I get the works of people like my friend Alex Leaf. I'm friends with him and his wife. He did his graduate work in protein overfeeding, and I've seen him talk about this stuff a lot, that protein overfeeding itself seems to cause recomposition. Okay, when you start trying to force feed enough protein, we get to a point where people start losing body fat even when they're trying to bulk, right? And sometimes they start losing scale weight because of the effects of the protein. But they gain muscle too when this occurs. So one of the things that I'm going to note, he's also pointed out, is that there are metabolic benefits of the fasting. And this is what I'm talking about recomposition here. You look at some of the studies and they're like, well, there doesn't seem to be more fat loss from doing fasted cardio and whatever, even though these bodybuilders swear by it. And here's the thing that I've noted with it, is that when you start doing all your training fasted, and then you start adding fasted cardio and stuff in, I've noticed you tend to get leaner. But here's the kicker. We tend to get leaner over time doing it without always losing a lot of body weight or without even an intentional calorie deficit, meaning we still might be eating significantly high calories. And that is the thing that I have personally noted with it. Very specifically is that it almost seems to cause a little bit of fat loss irrespective of calorie intake, and particularly when protein gets really high. And one of the things that I've always noted when people talk about why intermittent fasting itself doesn't necessarily cause more fat loss, and the data does support this, is because you regain fat later in the day, right? So it's like, okay, you're in a deficit part of the day and you lose fat, but because you're then technically in a surplus the other part of the day, see where we're going with this? You gain some body fat. And that makes sense, okay? That checks, because we know it's not about, your 24-hour or your 1 week. It's a full-time thing. In other words, we're gaining and losing some fat all the time. Like every day you gain and lose some body fat, probably to some extent, tiny amounts, right? Our cells are dynamic. So throughout different parts of the day, that's what happens. And so we're just looking at the net effect over time. But here's the thing that we note. When we train fasted and everything, obviously we're losing more fat during that window. We're losing more fat during that window. But we're not necessarily regaining fat later because the protein itself has a bit of a fat storage blunting effect. This is what we noted with even the protein overfeeding, that high thermic effect. And because when we are breaking some of the protein and stuff down later, that thermic effect of the protein, what has to be understood there is that that's coming from other places. People are like, yeah, protein has a thermic effect, but so it's just a different net calories. Well, no, the calories are not coming from the protein. They're coming from other stores in your body while you're doing it. So that's why very high protein intakes could have a mild recomposition effect. So it's actually blunting a bit of fat storage, because let's say you do a big heavy protein feed to break your fast. Okay, you're getting an immediate amount of extra calories required in the breakdown and digestion and utilization of the protein. In other words, even though you may have eaten a big bolus of food that should, in theory, cause some fat storage, you're still burning through your previous stores in the body if you were fasted when you hit the protein. And then we're getting this robust anabolic response from it. So the net effect, you may gain less fat than you would normally during the feed, particularly if you trained first and we've created a need for protein in our muscle tissue, and we've created this very large insulin sensitivity. So any of that insulinogenic response we're getting, it's definitely going to be feeding muscle tissue. So if we are training fasted and then we are protein overfeeding when we break our fasted window, the net effect is an improved body composition. Now, am I saying that this is magic and that it's going to be the most revolutionary thing? No, it's probably relatively minor, but we've all noticed it. Like, everyone who's really done this has noticed, or like, yeah, even if I'm not really in a deficit, I seem to get a little bit leaner over time. And that's what I've done. I used to be at quite a bit higher body fat than I am now. I know there's still some loose skin and some fat around the waistline from being really overweight. Some days it's tighter than others, right? Some days it's tighter than others. You guys can see in the footage. But I was considerably fatter. And I haven't really done a true low-calorie diet or deficit. I've just been doing fasted training well over here. People are like, how did you get leaner, Jason, from the fluffier power lifter? It's mostly just really high protein and fasting. And I've been doing fasted training for a while now, like well over a year at this point. Then I started adding fasted cardio. And then I eat all my food in the afternoon. I generally don't eat before noon. Okay, and I keep the protein really, really, really high, like well over a gram per pound of body weight, well over that. Okay, the net result, I seem to have just chipped away at body fat. And now I'm at a point to where I'm making almost lean gains doing it again, you know. So I've been pretty happy with that. I found it to be very effective, and I think it's a useful recomposition tool. So if we do all of our training fasted, and I personally find my training goes really well fasted. I know it's a point of contention. I personally find my training goes really, really well fasted. Not everybody does, but it took me time to build up to that. But it absolutely seems to help with overall body composition. It's a good way to recomposition in my personal experience as both a lifter, someone who puts out information, and as a coach. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.